Hello, legends, and welcome back to the Orlando Adventures podcast. I'm your host, Russ, and today's episode is the cheapest hotels in Orlando one. So, and I say this every single time, and I'll keep saying it, this is an episode that I've planned to do for a long time. And to be honest with you, I probably should have done it quite a while ago. However, the reason why I haven't is because it's quite a lot of prep, to be quite honest with you. It is a lot of prep. It's a lot of comparisons. It's a lot of looking on different websites, all that kind of stuff. But, you know, I wanted to put it out. I wanted to put it out there because there's a lot of variables. There's a lot of variables in play. There's a lot of different ways to do this, a lot of different ways to look at it. So let's just find one way. Let's find one way to do a bit of a comparison. Don't take all these numbers as gospel. Obviously, you know, I'm going to base this on the times that I've looked, for the length of trip that I've looked at, all that kind of stuff. And there's obviously additional costs incurred as well with regards to kind of like park tickets, all that kind of stuff. But we'll get into that. Obviously, with regards to hotels in Orlando, and it's a conversation that I've had since the very beginning of the podcast, because for me, certainly in my previous trips, my view and my kind of outlook on the hotel situation is that I've always wanted to get out to Orlando. That's the priority. My priority is I'm going to try and get out there. So I'm going to do it, you know, with whatever budget I've got. And if I've got a budget, then obviously sometimes you've got to negotiate. Sometimes you've got to compromise with yourself and your own finances and your own situation with regards to some of the things you can do, whether or not that is, you know, we're only going to do a Disney trip, we're only going to do a Universal trip, we're only going to do this, that, or the other, whatever it is you may be. The thing that I've always done generally is negotiate on where I'm going to stay, and it's the first thing for me that is always the negotiable. So I've stayed off site a lot. Obviously, it wasn't until my most recent trip that we actually decided that we were going to stay on site at Disney, and we loved it. We did love it, but that's not to say that I didn't love the previous experiences I had staying off site, kind of in various different places. Now, this is hotel, so I haven't compared villas, and the reason why is because villas, I find, and some people may tell me I'm wrong, I find that they're really, really good value in bigger groups. Okay, so you'll see the reason why I've only gone for hotels is because I've based my prices on 2 adults. Okay, so I've gone for 2 adults out of school holidays. So I've gone for the 2nd of June until the 11th of June, which is 10 nights. So 10 nights, 2 adults, non-school holidays. Okay. The other thing that is worth knowing is that it seems that you pay by the room in America or Orlando at very least. So it doesn't actually make a difference whether or not one person goes or 2 people go. You will pay the same amount for that room. So you pay for the room opposed to the people in it. So with that being said, obviously, you know, like with regards to the actual hotels on offer, it is down to personal preference. We know this. If you're looking for luxury hotels, luxury resorts, themed hotels, you're going to pay more. Now, that is the long and short of it. But if you're looking for somewhere to sleep, somewhere to spend very little time at, somewhere where you can basically have as a bit of a base, somewhere that you can basically go back to after your day at the park, go to sleep, get up in the morning and go straight back out again, these are going to be more the hotels for you in my argument. So the other thing worth knowing is that sometimes with some of these hotels, there can be extra costs. So it's something that I would suggest and I would recommend looking out for, because there'll be nothing more frustrating in my mind than booking somewhere, turning up to the desk, and then they go, oh, you've got to pay for parking here. That's £12 a day, for example, $15 or whatever it may be. And then you're like, oh, well, I'm here for 10 nights. Well, that's an extra 120 quid I wasn't planning on spending. And then they might say, oh, actually, there's resort fees or there's local tax fees and stuff like that, which might be another 130 quid. Like, if you get hit with a couple of those, suddenly where you've decided to stay might have not been as cheap as what you originally thought. So it's worth doing your research. It's worth knowing all of this kind of stuff before you go on your trip, because I personally, I really wouldn't want to get hit with an extra bill once I've turned up there and I've budgeted, you know, for your trip as it is. We know these are expensive trips. We know that, and we know that, you know, budgets can be tight on them, and any money that you spend on something that you weren't planning on spending, you know, that comes out of your merch budget, or it comes out of your tickets, or whatever else it may be. So I just want to bear that in mind. I will try and, you know, cover all of those kind of things as we go through it as well. The other thing is, obviously, I'm going to do a comparison. So I am going to compare offsite, the cheapest offsite. I'm going to compare the cheapest offsite, and then I'm going to compare the cheapest Universal. I'm going to compare the cheapest Disney. That is what I feel is the fairest comparison, in my opinion. The other variables we've got to play with is that I don't want to pick a hotel that's miles away. So I've tried to pick hotels that are close proximity, and obviously the Disney and the Universal hotels are what they are where they are. But obviously, with regards to off-site, there are cheaper options, but they might not be in the best location. And I think that is something that's worth bearing in mind as well, because, you know, in terms of value, if you're spending an extra hour on the road a day, that's an hour less that you're in the parks, or it's an hour less you're getting value out of the other things that you paid for, such as your tickets, for example. Anyway, I am going to do two prices. So I'm going to do prices based on getting a rental car and not having a rental car. So I'm going to base prices on having a rental car and also not having a rental car. So just using Ubers, Lyfts, all that kind of stuff. I have got a rough price for a hire car. So I basically, for those dates from the 2nd of June to the 11th of June, I went on, I think it was Got Car Rental. Like, other sites are available. I've used that one. I basically went, right, I'm going to do cheapest search. It came up with a cheapest cost of about £160, but I'd never heard of the hire car company, so I wouldn't recommend it. I did an episode on hire cars, and I basically said that I personally, I wouldn't even look at it if it's not in the airport. So if it's an off airport company, wouldn't even bother looking at it, because the last thing I want to do is do a travel day, get to the airport, and then have to go and get on some transportation to get to my transportation. Can't be bothered. I would rather pay the extra money for it to be on the site, if you know what I mean. So I based it on a hire company, the cheapest hire company, who I recognise and have used. So I've used quite a few of them through the years. So, you know, I'm very confident that I know which ones are actually all right. This one came out with $1, and it was for like the smallest car, inevitably, and it was £230 for the 10 nights. So, you know, whatever way you're going to work it out, is 23 quid a day, something like that. So that's my kind of benchmark. That's what I'm going to go with every single kind of comparison that we do. And then with regards to the Uber, it's a difficult one, because obviously the prices are going to vary, but you'll see the way that I've basically covered the Uber. I think that the Uber is going to cost you there or thereabouts the same as if you were to park. It might be a bit less, so don't come for me, but I'm thinking if you did additional trips here, there, and everywhere as well, and you're not paying for fuel, then I reckon it's going to kind of cover about the same as the actual parking at the parks. But obviously we'll cross that in a minute. So let's go through some hotels. So we've got obviously the cheapest options. Like I said, the cheapest options, they're offsite. Okay, so they are offsite hotels. Now, a little bit like the hire car. Now, obviously, I can give you the cheapest of cheap. And for example, I've gone on various websites, but the website that for me was coming out the cheapest was one called Travel Republic. Okay, so this is just hotel only. We're not doing flights or anything like that. We're not doing park tickets. We are just doing straight up hotel. The reason why is because obviously if I start trying to compare like full holiday prices for now, it's difficult, because obviously my closest airport is Gatwick or Heathrow, but your closest airport might be Manchester, or it might be Edinburgh, or like, do you know what I mean? Like, so it could be anywhere, and I don't think it's a fair comparison if I'm just talking about Heathrow and you're not flying from Heathrow, for example. All right, so whereas hotels, they're obviously all in the same place. We're all going to the same ones. So let's compare this one. So talking about offsite, we've got the cheapest options, and there's a couple ones which personally I wouldn't recommend because I don't know enough about them, and I don't know if location wise they stack up. There was one that came out called Garnet Inn and Suites. This is so cheap. It's 298 quid. 298 quid for 10 nights. That's under 30 quid a night for two people. That is ludicrous. It's almost, to me, it's almost too good to be true, if you know what I mean. And like location wise, it was a little bit further out. So I'm not going to compare that one. For me, I would rather compare ones and I'd rather recommend ones I've actually been to. It's similar with the next one. The next one was one called Mikasa Hotel. My House Hotel is the English comparison, English translation of that. 416 quid. Again, I'm not going to compare it. Let's go to one that we all know. Let's go to one we all know. We know it's budget. We know it's cheap, but also, and I will say, I have been there, so I can actually give you a recommendation. This one's actually got 6,400 reviews, whereas the other two that I mentioned haven't got any. It's not worth talking about them. No, it's not. I know I have talked about them, but let's go to this one, and it's a Rosen Inn. So you've got Rosen Inn, you've got Rosen Inn International, Rosen Inn at Point Orlando. You've got various different Rosens. It's a 3-star hotel, so don't, you've got to set your expectations with a Rosen. You've got to know what you're kind of signing yourself up for. It is a hotel. It's cheap. I will be honest. It is dated decor. The decor is a little bit dated. There's no argument. So, if you're going to get hung up on the fact that it is not luxury, don't go to a Rosen. All right? Like, just don't even waste the time. So if you are happy that what you're going to is a hotel where you're going to basically have somewhere to sleep and that is it, then a Rosen Inn probably works really well. So let's look at some prices. So pricing wise for a Rosen Inn is £545. Okay, so based on those, that's 10 nights, two people, 545 quid. So it's not a huge amount of money. I actually think it's quite well priced. Next thing we've got is how much does it cost to park at a Rosen Inn? From my experience, you don't pay. Now, whether or not that has changed, I did look, I couldn't see anything. Whether or not that's changed since I stayed at one a few years ago, I don't know. But from my experience, you don't have to pay to park at a Rosen, which is obviously a big plus. It is a big plus. So no extra with regards to parking. There's no extra with regards to kind of like state fees or anything as well. And next thing we've got is I'm going to compare parking at the park. So obviously we're going for 10 nights, so I'm going to compare it on 10 days. It doesn't matter whether or not you're going to go to park for 7 days or 8 days. Let's just do everything the same. So let's base it on the worst case scenario that you go the most, which is the best case scenario because you get to go do the most park days, but it obviously is the most expensive because you're going to pay for more parking. So that works out at about £29 a day, whether or not you're parking at Universal or Disney. 29 quid a day. So that's £290 to park at the parks. Or I'm going to say it's going to cost you about 290 quid to Uber there and back and other trips you may do as well for the entirety of your trip. I don't know. It could be different, but I've got to base it on something. That's what I'm going with. I think that's probably a fair comparison. I think you're probably going to spend, I don't know, $12, $13 each way on a journey. I don't know, depending where you are. Obviously, if you're at a Rosen, then to Disney, it is a little bit further. Obviously, Universal is quite close, but that's what I'm basing it on. All right. So, if you come at me and tell me that it's more expensive or it's cheaper, like, cool. But obviously, I've got to base it off something. And I've tried to make it fair. That's the main thing. So I'm basing it off 290 quid to either park at the parks or to Uber there. I'm chucking 20 quid on for fuel because you won't use a huge amount of fuel in Orlando. And the fuel that you do use is really, really cheap to replace anyway. You're 230 quid for the hire car. So we've got two prices. All right. We've got without the hire car, but obviously with your Uber, it's going to cost you $855 there or thereabouts to stay at a Rosen Inn for two people. It's pretty cheap. It is pretty cheap. It's just over 400 quid each to basically stay for 10 nights in Orlando, getting to the parks. Okay, I could have done this without the getting to the parks, but I feel like it's a variable that actually we do need to compare. So the next price we've got is with your hire car is going to be £1,085 all in. So, I mean, realistically, what is it? It's $230 in it. It's literally, it's the price of the hire car. It's basically the price of the hire car and the fuel, I suppose. So it's basically, that's the difference, about 250 quid. So, you know, it's an interesting one, and it's not bad. It's not bad. That's not a huge amount of money to stay for 10 nights in Orlando, in my opinion. I think that that's quite well priced. I think Rosen's actually in quite a good location. Obviously, you're on International Drive for quite a lot of the Rosens. So, you know, accessibility to be able to go to restaurants and stuff is pretty good. You might use less on an Uber, trust me. Like, I get it. But at the same time, I've got to just compare equal numbers. So we'll go back to all these numbers later when we do a full comparison of all of them, don't be wrong. Next one we're going to go to. We're going to go to Universal Hotels. Well, the cheapest Universal hotel that was coming up for me was to go to Dockside. So with Universal, what is worth knowing is that you do need to pay to park at the hotel. So to park at the hotels is going to cost you, for Dockside, £12 per night just to park your car there. Just to have the privilege of parking your car at a Universal hotel is going to cost you 12 quid a night. So obviously we've got an additional fee of 120 quid to put on top of this price immediately. Fair enough. It is what it is, but it is worth bearing in mind. You obviously get different value with Universal. So you get the Universal transport. Okay, so you get value in that. Obviously, if you're staying near to Universal, you're going to Universal a lot. Like, it's nice and easy from what I've seen, what people have said, and what other people's experiences have been. Pretty good. So there is value in that. Obviously, if you're just in a Universal holiday, then you're not going to need, you know, to get many Ubers or anything like that to go to Disney. So, you know, depending on what your situation is, you might be able to negate that cost. But obviously, we're going to compare it, saying that you're going to do Universal and Disney. So you need to go to both of them, and you're going to do other stuff in and around the parks, outside the parks as well. So you are going to still need to do the kind of full payment for the Uber. You don't get car parking at the actual theme park itself included either. So for Dockside, the price just for the hotel is £1,015. You've got 120 quid to park at the hotel. You've got £290 for parking at the parks or an Uber. You've got your hire car and your fuel at 250 quid. So without the hire car at Universal's Dockside, it is £1,305. With the hire car, incurring obviously the parking fees and all that kind of stuff as well, it's £1,675. So that is worth knowing. It's worth kind of like having that in the back of your mind, knowing that obviously with a hire car, it is quite a lot more expensive to stay at a Universal hotel. Next one up, we have got the Disney Hotel. So the Disney Hotel, obviously, as a lot of you know, is going to be either of the all-star resorts. So you've got all-star sports, you've got all-star movies, and you've got all-star music. Obviously, these are on site. They're in the Disney resort. So, you know, accessibility wise is fantastic for going to Disney, but it is a little bit further away if you're obviously trying to go to Universal as well. So the thing that we got to bear in mind, the things that we got to compare on this one is obviously the price of the hotel, which is coming out at £1,342. So it is the most expensive of the three options. You don't have to pay to park at the hotel. So you've got no fees on that one, which is brilliant, to be fair. Obviously, with regards to parking in the parks as well, you get parking for Disney included. Now, obviously, I've got to do a fair comparison, and I've got to say that basically, as I've said with all the other examples, we're going to both parks. So you are going to go to Universal, and I'm going to base this saying that you don't have an annual pass or anything like that. So you basically, we're still going to have to pay to park at Universal. So I've got a parking fee basically of 100 quid. I'm basing that off going to Universal for 3 days. There or thereabouts. Okay. It might come in less than that, but let's call it 100 quid. And then obviously you got your car hire and your fuel at 250 quid. And then I've put an Uber fee on this one at £100. And the reason why is because obviously for Disney, you've got the capability of getting around the Disney resort using all of their transportation. You're going to spend more time using their transport in a 10-day trip than I think you would the Universal one. Obviously, it depends how you're going to structure your trip. If you're doing more Disney or more Universal, it's obviously going to go kind of swing one way or the other. But I can only base it on the fact that we've got 10 nights. You're probably going to spend 7 of the days in Disney, 3 of them in Universal, for example. So the prices we've got for this one, so without the car, £1,442. So that's you getting to the theme parks, all of that included, your Ubers, all that kind of stuff. With the car, it's going to cost you £1,692. So it is the most expensive option. Let's be real. It is the most expensive option, but not by a huge amount. Is the thing that is probably worth noting. So this is where we can do the comparison of all of them. So let's just go through without the car, all three options. There was a Rosen option, which is the off-site option I've gone for. There was Universal's Dockside, which is the Universal option. And then there's Disney's All-Star Resorts, which is the Disney option, obviously. So for Rosen, off-site, without a hire car, all in is coming out at £855 to get to the theme parks. For Universal's Dockside, it's £1,305 getting to all the theme parks. And then for the Disney All-Star Resorts, it is £1,542 getting to all of the theme parks. So obviously the order in which I've done them is the order of cost, realistically, isn't it? So the Rosen at 855 quid is good value. It really is. There's no argument. Like if you are trying to do this trip on a budget, Rosen without a car is the cheapest way that you can possibly do Orlando in a hotel, unless you want to go to one of the other cheap hotels, but obviously that's not what we were comparing. So 855 quid. The next option you've got is Universal's Dockside. So without a car, it is coming out at £1,305. So, I mean, what's that? About £450 more to stay at the Dockside Resort. The next option is the Disney All-Star Movies, Sports or Music, and that is coming out at £1,442. So about £140 more expensive than staying at Dockside and about £600 more expensive than staying at a Rosen Inn. Now let's do the comparison with the hire car included as well. So if you went to Rosen, it's £1,085 all in with parking, with getting to all the parks, all that kind of stuff. Dockside, £1,675 with the hire car. And then All-Star is £1,692 with the hire car. So let's do a bit of a summarization. Now, obviously, I've got to do a bit of a disclaimer because these prices are subject to change. These prices are not me recommending them, but these are me just doing an online comparison, finding some prices, relaying the information. I imagine by the time you look, the prices will probably be different. So please don't hold me to it. But what I'm saying is that you might be able to find them cheaper. You might be able to find them more expensive. And I'm certainly not giving you advice on how to spend your money either. I'm just basically saying that this is what I've found. This is what came up when I did a search. This might give you a rough guide, a rough comparison if you were thinking about booking and you were interested in knowing the differences between pricing up on-site and off-site. So, you know, with all those prices being said, and obviously I could have just done this with the hotel. Let's be honest. Like, I've probably made this more confusing for myself than I needed to. But you've got to price into the fact that you still need to get to the theme parks. There is no point comparing hotels if you can't get to the theme parks. Like this, for me, it's a wasted exercise. I think it's a pointless exercise if I do that. So I've got to include how we get there, like, because you do have to get there one way or another. So let's just compare it. So, you know, let's like I said, let's do a bit of a summarization. First things first, Orlando can be done cheaper. All right. So there's no argument that you can do Orlando on the quote unquote cheap. So you can save yourself about 500 quid by not staying on site. That is the difference that I found by looking this morning on Saturday, the whatever it is, Saturday, the 15th of March. That is the price that I found. So it was about 500 quid cheaper by not staying on site. So if you're doing this on a budget, if you want to get out to Orlando, if that is your main focus, is getting to Orlando, staying off site is the way to do it. Like it is. There's no argument. It's the cheapest way to do it. Obviously, you know, we can get into the villa conversation and stuff. We'll get into that another time by all means. But like in this scenario, if we're just comparing hotels, staying off site is the cheapest way to do it. Okay, but it's where the value is. So where is the value for you? Is it in the experience? Is it about getting out into Orlando and spending time kind of in the theme parks, which we're obviously spending additional money on? It's realistically why we're there as well. So surely this is going to be the first thing to compromise on with regards to the hotel. Like you can't really compromise on the price of your Disney tickets. Your Disney tickets are whatever Disney say they are. Like obviously you might find a deal like on a website here, there, and everywhere. You might save yourself 50 quid. Like cool. Like, you know, that is, you know, it's a Spirit jersey or whatever. Like, do you know what I mean? So like, yeah, you can save a bit of money here or there on different stuff, and I would recommend doing so. But ultimately, your theme park tickets are going to be whatever the price is. You're going to pay them because you want to go to the parks. Obviously, we can get into the conversation about, you know, becoming annual pass holders, all that kind of stuff, but that's a different conversation again. So if we're just talking like, you know, straight up, black and white, get into the theme parks, get into the hotels, get into Orlando, this is the way we got to do it. So, you know, the first thing we can compromise on, I mean, realistically, it's got to be the hotel, because where you fly from, yeah, you might be able to compromise on it. You might be able to go to Manchester. You might be able to go to Heathrow. You might have that choice, but also you've got to take into effect where is the value again? Is there value in having to travel all out the country to go to a different airport? I don't know. It depends where you are. It depends what your situation is, doesn't it? So there's a couple of kind of like hot takes from this episode and the information that I have found out. Rosen Inn is cheap. There is no argument. Rosen Inn is a cheap hotel. If you just want to go there, spend the night, wake up in the morning and go to a theme park, Rosen Inn ticks every box on that. So you can't argue it. It is cheap. I've been to a Rosen 3 times. I'll be honest with you, I've never really had a bad word to say about it. It's been absolutely fine. Is basically what I can say. It's fine. It's you get what you pay for. Don't expect to get anything more than that. Don't expect to get anything that modern or anything like that either. But it is cheap. Okay. Universal. Okay. So what hot take can we take from Universal in this example? Well, Universal has got good value. Okay. So it's got good value, in my opinion, if you're going to Universal. All right. So it's in close proximity to Universal Studios, Islands of Adventure, and City Walk, and it will be in close proximity. Also, it's in close proximity to Volcano Bay, and it's also going to be in close proximity to Epic Universe as well. Obviously, they're going to have all of their Universal transportation, which is going to be nice and easy for you to be able to get to the parks. It runs frequently. It comes, you know, with your booking, so it's a good shout. It's a good way to do it. I mean, realistically, you're in walking distance from the resort as well. But the point is that I think that the value of Universal is staying and going to Universal. However, Universal is not geared towards having a hire car at all. In my opinion, it is not good value to have a hire car at Universal. It is, in fact, it's expensive, like comparatively. And comparatively, I'm comparing it to Disney. So Disney, in my opinion, is a good deal when you're driving. So obviously there was about 15 quid difference to stay at the Disney hotel or the Universal hotel if you had a hire car. So I think that's a good deal. And the good deal comes with the fact that the parking's included for the Disney parks. And then obviously you get the parking included for the hotel as well. So it is kind of more geared to the hire car market, in my opinion. But obviously then you get the value of the Disney transportation as well. So there is an argument for, if you're doing the bulk of the trip in Disney, do you need the hire car? I don't know. Like, obviously, I like a hire car. If you like hire car, if you like being able to kind of get in and around, out about in Orlando, if you want to get to Celebration, if you want to get to, some of the different theme parks, if you want to go out for meals in the evenings and stuff like that as well, I think that the hire car is worth having. But you've got to weigh that up for, does it work for you? And then obviously the Disney transportation is fantastic to be able to get around the Disney resort. If you want to get to Universal is a bit further away. So then for me, I think it's worth having the hire car, or obviously you're going to just spend more money on an Uber, for example. Realistically, I mean, if I'm taking my hot take from these prices, like Rosen's cheap. Rosen is almost non-comparable because it is that much cheaper. It's like £500 to £600 cheaper, depending kind of like where which route you're going to do. All right, so £500 to £600 cheaper compared to the Universal and the Disney hotels. The comparison here comes between the Universal and the Disney hotel, in my opinion. Hire car, if you've got a hire car, stay at Disney World. That's my recommendation, because it's as good as the same price, but you're going to get, in my opinion, more benefits to stay at Disney. But that's not to say it's better, but that's just what I've taken from it. Okay, I think that if you're more immersed in a Disney trip, like, obviously you're going to get more value out of that. If you're doing a Universal trip, then obviously you need to be in Universal. But then the next thing is without the hire car. There is about £150 difference between Universal and Disney if you don't have a hire car, from the maths that I've worked out. £150 is £150 or £70 each. That much cheaper to stay at the Universal one, which, and I haven't stayed at Dockside, so I can't give you a comparison in terms of what I found with the rooms. From what I've seen, the Dockside rooms, they're a bit smaller, they're a little bit more basic than what you might get in the Disney All-Star resorts, but that's minor. It's so minor. There's not a lot in it. That's the long and short. There's not a lot in it. Is that £170 worth it for you to be closer to Disney if you're doing more of a Disney holiday, if you're going to get more out of using kind of the transportation, all that kind of stuff? That's the thing to weigh up. So, what would I do? What would I do? It's so difficult, because obviously I've been an off-site guy. I've been an off-site guy through and through, and it's only until the most recent trip that I've obviously gone on site at Disney, and obviously the next trip's going to be on site at Disney as well. I need to tick off some Universal ones as well, because I want to do a fair comparison. I really do. What would I do? It's so difficult, and it depends on your situation, doesn't it? It depends on your financial situation. How frequently do you want to get to Orlando? If all you want to do is get out there as often as possible, my recommendation is go to a Rosen or go to a similar hotel. There's obviously, there's other ones. There's things like Avanti Palms and stuff. I think they've got a resort fee, or like the local tax fee, I think about £130, and it is a bit more expensive. To be honest with you, like, it sits kind of in between the price of the Rosen and Dockside from what I looked at, but don't quote me on it. So you've got the Rosen option. That is what I would go for if you're trying to just get there as often as possible. If this is more holiday of a lifetime, quote unquote, then I would probably want to become more immersed. I'd probably want to, engage in more of the kind of activities you can do in and around the resorts, which you're going to get more from if you stay at either the Universal Resort or the Disney Resort. I think there's not a lot in them. I don't think there's a huge amount in them between the more budget-friendly Disney hotels and Universal hotels. So it is going to be personal preference, and it's going to be depending where you're going to spend the bulk of your trip. So that's my take. I loved our stay at Disney's All-Star Music. I thought it was lovely. I thought the room was really nice. It was clean. It was spacious. It had all the stuff you needed. It was in close proximity to Disney, and obviously we did a very Disney-focused trip, so it worked out perfectly for us. It was a little bit more of a drive to get to Universal, but that's not something that bothers me. And you've just got to weigh these up for yourself. So I hope this has been useful. That's the main thing. I hope that it has been useful, because I just wanted to shine light on the fact that these trips, they can be done quote unquote cheaper. And I'm not saying it's cheap, because it's not, but because you have got to take into account things like the plane tickets, your flights. You've got to take into account things like your park tickets. You've got to take into account things like food. So all of those things all in obviously make a hell of a difference. So what I will do, I wanted to do this one is to start a bit of a new kind of mini series. Obviously, I've done things like tour around the parks, like best and worst, all that kind of stuff. I wanted to do this as the start of a mini series where I'll probably do one of these once a month or something. And next one, instead of hotel, I'll try and do holiday, or I'll try and do flights or something like that. Do you know what I mean? I'll try and do different topics so we can get a bit more into the topic of money. Like, some people don't want to talk about the costs and stuff, but I'm happy to talk about it if I'm just doing a comparison for you. So that's where I'm at. Okay, so I hope you've all enjoyed it. I genuinely do. I hope that you've all enjoyed this episode. As ever, thank you all so much for sharing. It does mean the world, and every single person who shares every episode, it blows my mind. It absolutely does, and I appreciate each and every single one of you. It will never ever get old. It really, really won't, because I love it. I absolutely love it. I love talking to you all. I love interacting with you all. And just to see people enjoying these episodes and to get some value out of them yourselves, it's so wonderful to see. So once again, I hope this has been useful. I hope you've enjoyed it. And I will speak to you all in the next one.